Hey guys, today's video is a nice quick one. This is just a little quick tutorial on how to get your violin out ready for your lesson or for your home practice. This is perfect for beginners who have just got their violin or for students who might need a little reminder. So first of all, make sure that the violin is safely on a flat surface and be sure that it is facing the correct way. So occasionally young students might have it upside down, so we want it to be the correct way up for when we open it so the violin doesn't fall out. So unlock and unzip, make sure that you unzip it all the way around, otherwise it won't open up properly. Okay, so a lot of cases will have a nice little blanket for the violin. So just take that off and put it to the side, then get your violin out by the neck and get your shoulder rest out and pop that on. And then we want to get the bow out, then close the case, tighten your bow here, and in fact we'll put the little blanket back away out the way as well. And there we are, ready to play. So in my teaching studio, often, well not often, but sometimes students, we're not always playing the violin, so when we're not playing I'll get the students to put their violin on the case just so it's not haphazardly around on the floor somewhere. Alright, so when you're putting your shoulder rest on your violin, your shoulder rest has a curve upwards and a curve downwards. So the upwards curve is actually to sit on your shoulder. That's why it's called a shoulder rest. So just make sure that when you do put this on your violin and you go to use your violin, you don't sit it here because that's no longer covering that curve. So you want that curve to be on the curve of the shoulder. That's what it's there for, okay? So the violin won't sit out to the side either. It's not in the front here. So just make sure that you get that position nice. You have to play around with it a little bit, find what works for you. Okay, then we've got the shoulder rest. So putting this on the violin, we've got the little feet. So we don't want them facing outwards. They are going to grab on to the body of the violin here. So have them facing inwards. You can make these a little higher or lower if you need to. They're just screws, depending on obviously the type of shoulder rest you have. But this particular type that I have, it's a kun. It can do that. So okay, so we want the little feet facing inwards. Then we're going to the side. I'll hold the violin nice and steady with my left hand. I'm right-handed, so if you're left-handed you might like to do it the opposite way. You have to play around and find what works for you. And also sitting on the ground or sitting on a chair can be easier if you're just starting out. Okay, so we want to get those two little feet. We're going to hook them on to the side close to the chin rest. And then with the other ones, we don't want to try and force them over the edge of the violin. So I just take them to the side here, so they're a little bit off the violin, and then I'm going to just slide it on until it sort of wedges as far as it can comfortably go. And that's perfect for me. But if it's not perfect for you, you can play around. You can try and put it a little closer to the chin rest if you need to, which means you'll slide it further up the other side. Okay, so, or you can have it more like I have it, more like there. Alright, so just play around with what works best for you. And for young students who are growing, this can change as they're growing. So sometimes students' necks actually grow and you need to adjust the setup here with the shoulder rest and the chin rest. Okay. So the bow, when you take the bow out of the case, hopefully it will already be loose, the hair will be loose. So we need to tighten the hair. So again, I'm right-handed, so my left hand is going to hold the bow nice and steady. Just where the stick joins the frog, I find that nice and sturdy right there. So then we're just going to screw the screw, we're screwing away from it, we're tightening it, so it's like you're tightening a tap. The same as the fine tuners, when you're tightening them to make them sharper, you tighten them, you turn them to the right. So we're turning the same way. So we don't need to go crazy. So also, yeah, I actually always just feel I usually use the feeling in my hand before I actually use the visual. So when I'm tightening, there comes a point where it starts to get a little bit harder, and it's about there where I generally find is the best place to stop, and that's about right. I might adjust it a little bit sometimes, but so when we tighten the bow, we still want to have this curve in the stick. If students keep tightening it, that curve is going to flatten out, and if they go crazy, which sometimes happens, it ends up bowing this way rather than this way, which we definitely don't want. Now, sometimes I see students measuring like this, and maybe that's a little bit of a guide. I don't really like doing that because you shouldn't touch the hair of your bow. I don't like to touch the hair of my bow because it makes it dirty. And that may be a good guide if you're just beginning, but it's not always the best guide because sometimes students have, well, not very good bows, and sometimes to actually get the bow hair straight, it's got like this big, it's basically straight. So you kind of just have to play with what your bow is like. But it's really, we just want it flat enough that we can actually play without the bow hair touching the wood. Okay, so when we loosen the bow hair, which when you put the violin, when you put the bow away, just doing the opposite of what we did before. So we're loosening it, and the hair doesn't have to, you don't have to go crazy loosening it. You don't have to have the screw coming out. That's a bit too much. Okay. But it will be loose, and then if you try to play, the hair is actually just touching the wood. So that's what we want to avoid when we're actually playing. So when you tighten it, you don't have that. So do make sure though that you loosen it to put it away in your case. So when we put the violin away, just making sure we loosen our bow hairs first of all. When we put the bow away, be sure that it goes in tip first up this way, okay? Occasionally I see some bows facing this way, which is not correct. Also, we want to avoid having the bow hanging this way because it will, it can put a bit of strain on the bow hairs. So just imagine this is a little car. We're going to go meow and drive into the carport here, pop it on there and lock that in place. Okay, now make sure that you don't leave your shoulder rest on when you put it into the case, because if you try to close it here, it will actually, it could damage the bridge if you try to force that closed. So make sure you take the shoulder rest off, then carefully putting your violin back in, put the little safety belt on there and pop your shoulder rest back in, pop your little blanket on, closing the case up, and make sure importantly that you do zip it up. Sometimes some students might forget, and when they go to pick it up, the violin almost falls out. So put that all away properly, and we're ready to go. Hey, thanks for joining me here today. I hope that video was helpful. I'm sure it will be helpful to some of my online students, especially the ones who are far, far away from me and I can't catch up with them in person at all. It's also a good little reminder for some students who tend to forget some of these little points. So make sure you remember them. Make sure you hit subscribe and the bell down below, like this video, and leave a comment, and I'll see you next time.